order. I have 6:31 p.m. on Tuesday, September 17th. Roll call. Mr. Doss? Here. Ms. Boyette?
Here.
Mr. Griffin?
Here.
Mr. Elliott is on excused absence. Ms. Mydell? Mr. Bowen?
Here.
And I am here. Okay. If we could stand, would someone like to do the invocation? Mr. Bowen? Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for yet another, what we hope to be a glorious meeting for the city of Rankin to help provide our future with sets of guidelines, ordinances, and please help us to make the right decisions. We pray in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, given that we has everyone had the opportunity to look at the agenda for today? Mr. Bone?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin? Okay. Are there any issues or comments that you want to make on today's agenda?
Just to move item 3.
Item 3 to item 1. Okay, so we will move item 3 to topic 1.
You need a second. That's the first, you just need a
I
second.
second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then if I can either get an approval or a denial on this agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, Ms. Boyette makes a motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bowen. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, the previous minutes, Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. Has everyone been able to review the previous meeting's minutes? Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, if I could get a motion to either approve or deny the August 20th meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay, Mr. Doss makes a motion to approve. Second by Mr. Griffin. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. Okay, so as previously stated, we will be taking our new business. We will take topic number 3, question and answer with the wastewater treatment plant director, Tommy Key. We will move him up to first on the roll. If you'd like to please step to the podium. And thank you for attending.
Good evening. I appreciate being here and thank y'all for y'all's service. I really appreciate it. My name's Tommy Key and I run the wastewater treatment department. That's my privilege. It is a plant that is a 1 million gallon a day facility. And it's been there for quite some time, since like 2005. It's a carousel style plant that's an activated sludge plant. We have tertiary filters, and so there's tertiary treatment in it. Right now we're running at about 900,000 gallons a day, so it's about at its capacity. There's going to be hopefully a new plant. We just got approval on the designs for the new plant, the upgraded plant. That can't come soon enough, but that's what we do.
Will that be the existing plant?
Yes.
They're just gonna upgrade that?
Yes,
Okay.
What capacity?
2 million gallons a day. So, and it'll be, the way that we treat it will be changed from a carousel style plant to SBRs, which are sequential batch reactors.
Okay, so for those of us that don't know anything about carousels, or can
Yeah,
you
it's
briefly
just,
explain?
it's a couple different ways of accomplishing the same thing. There's some benefits to the SBRs as far as footprint and building costs and, expandability and some things that are, the reasons that we're going that way. But, so the plant will be 2 million gallons a day at the end of that construction.
And when are they expecting that construction to take place and possibly end?
Exciting question. So, that's been anticipated. The newest thing that has happened is the EPD approved our design and plans. So with that approval, we can move forward with, bidding out all of the work and equipment. So that should be done by the end of this year. We're gonna try to get that done by the end of this year, so possibly, construction can begin.
And for
Early
those
in
that
the
don't
course.
know in the city and maybe watching online, where is the water treatment facility at?
500 Ackerman Road.
Okay, so off Fort Howard.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay.
Whole Fourth, the golf course.
And one, I wanna thank you for, doing all you do out there. It's a real stinky job, I'm sure. What would you say if you had a wish list, and this may be going out of my scope to ask this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. If you had a wish list of something other than capacity of making your jobs run smoother, what would it be?
You know, I think that, the city thus far, I've been here 9 years, they've never, put us in a bad situation. Like we've been, able to have the things that we need to be able to do our job. And fortunately, what we're trying to manage right now is a plant that is at the end of its capacity. And, with a new plant on the horizon, right? So we're trying to almost run things that we can to failure. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
to, we're kind of hovering right now. So that's a very good question. I'm so glad that you asked it. But until the new plant comes on board, I think that whenever the new plant comes on board, there's going to be a lot of things that are unforeseen probably that we can't tell right now that will have to be addressed. But all of them are exciting. Nothing is, we're not looking. The biggest thing that we're dealing with right now is being able to, once the plant gets to 1 million gallons a day intake, and we're putting all that we can toward the golf course, so we don't put 100% of that influent in the stream, we have the ability to irrigate the golf course with it, which is, if we didn't have that ability right now, it would even be a rougher situation, but because we have the ability to divert that water. The biggest thing is just having a new plant on board before our growth catches up with us. Right.
And I know there's been some discussions, just 100,000 foot level, of the opportunity of putting more gray water into the community for sprinkler systems to help, get rid of some of that water. Is that something that would benefit your plant and would take some of the restraints off as far as putting it back into the streams?
Yeah, any kind of reuse that we can do, but not gray water, just to clarify, it's reuse water.
Reuse water?
And it goes in purple lines, but anyway, yes, anything that we can do like that it just makes it to where it takes that burden, whatever's able to be reused, we don't have to put it in the creek, and we are permitted on our discharge into the creek. Does that make sense?
Yes.
As well as, possibly, it's a point of revenue, like you don't get, that's valuable water.
Right.
What do you mean?
Okay, because I know there's been some discussions about, we have over 500 homes in Lost Plantation. There's probably 8,000 to 9,000 homes going down Fort Howard that some of that reuse water could be routed to those areas for, because let's face it, we know what our future is with the Florida aquifer, and we wanna try to maintain it the best we can. And if we can use that, I feel, instead of, using fresh water for yards, I think it benefits everybody. So, how many employees does the, treatment facility employ?
At this point, I have 2 employees, so 3 of us altogether.
Wow. That's really good. Okay, fantastic. Any other questions?
I just have to say, I was part of the, 2022 Leadership Effingham class, and we
Oh.
came out and you gave us a fantastic tour of your facility. We met your staff, and just wanna say that was just really eye-opening to see the whole process and how it works, and you definitely know what you're doing out there, and it was very interesting to see that. And so I just wanna say you were definitely, an asset to the city, and thank you for everything you do. And I highly encourage, I wish we could do more, tours of, I'm sure I'm not quite sure you would love that one day, but I wish that more of the public could come out and see kind of what's going on there. It's just really a great way to see it
Maybe we
occur.
could do like a short 5-10 minute video of the overall process, and we've got the city site, but I mean, there's a lot of.
Or maybe just weekly tours on Wednesdays, you wanna do that? But really, though, it was really interesting to see the whole process
Yeah.
and how all that went, and just really to see, even then, this was 2022, I know you guys were saying, hey, we're really nearing that capacity level, so
Mhm.
I know it'll be wonderful to see that. And so going up to 2 million, how long do you think that is gonna be sustainable for Lincoln?
I need a magic ball.
Yeah, right?
So, no, that is a very good question, and there are, people that could speak to that. I might not be the one.
Gotcha.
But, you figure it's at least 100 gallons per person of wastewater that's, created a day. So,
100 gallons per, that's a lot,
yeah, it's a good bit of water.
I mean, I know they make us restrict the flow of toilets and all that stuff, so I didn't think it would be 100 gallons a day.
Mhm.
So are we servicing any areas outside of the proper municipal limits?
That I know of, no.
Okay, cause like parts of Chimney Road, I know some places we supply water, but I didn't know if we supplied sewage as
Mhm.
well.
No.
Okay, outstanding.
We're about to get our first industrial influence, right, whenever all of that stuff comes on board.
Yeah, what's the estimated on that, if we're talking 100 gallons per person, what would an industrial facility estimate?
Well, it's hard, cause are you talking about Saguon?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because, I mean, they're gonna have between, we've heard 750 to 1,000 employees, but they're not all gonna be there at once, so
Mhm.
I don't.
And metal stamping doesn't require a lot of water. Mainly it's wash down water that comes from those facilities.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's great. Thank you so much. You're part of what makes the city of Lincoln go, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Have a good
Okay,
day.
thanks.
Have a good night.
Well, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is adjourn, right?
I have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, they're so funny.
Okay, so, let's go on to the next new business, review proposed amendments to the City of Rickett ordinances, specifically certain chapters 90, which is zoning and growth, Article 2 administration, Article 7 land development and land disturbing regulations, Article 8 land development and land subdivision completion performance bond required, wow, there's a lot. Article 9 fees required for specific city services, Article 10 construction inspections, record drawing and as-built certifications required, Article 11 subdivision regulations, Article 12 infrastructure and construction standards, and Article 13 procedures for administration and enforcement. Ms. Terry Lewis, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So, we're not gonna go through this page by page. I'm gonna give you the highlights of it, and then if there's anything specific that any of y'all want to talk about, that you came across when you were, going through it, we can talk about that as well. So I will tell you before we start, so we're starting with chapters 6 and 8 tonight, and then we'll follow up with 9 and 10, but in terms of like where they are in the process, 9 and 10 will be the next ones to go to council for a public hearing. They go Monday for a public hearing. 6 and 8 won't go till October for a public hearing. So just to kind of keep y'all aware of what's going on with these chapters. So 6 is our development review and approval process requirement. So this is where it sets out how all of the rules and regulations for approving things like site plans, variances, conditional uses, rezonings. So this chapter goes through, kind of a little bit more specific about what the actual processes are that are required. It goes through the legal requirements, so things like notices, both to the Effingham Herald, to surrounding property owners, as well as posting signs. So all that's covered in here. A few things that we are changing that you would want to be, or that we are proposing changing, because again, we're looking at ways that we can be more efficient, that we can, if there are things that we can do at the staff level, we want to be able to do that. If there are things that can be approved just at the board level. So right now, most of what the board looks at, you make a recommendation and it goes on to city council for them to make the actual final decision. But in this, there are going to be some things that can come to the board for that final approval. So some examples are administrative site plans, and then we're also going to have an administrative variance. So with an administrative variance, staff would approve that, but if somebody wanted to appeal the issuance of that staff variance, that appeal would come to the Planning and Zoning Board to decide whether staff made the right call or not. For, I don't want to get too far. The other part is we are going to allow variances, and I might be going too far ahead. We're going to allow variances for duplexes and single family at a certain level, and those variances, and I'll talk more about it when we get to that section, those variances will actually be heard and decided by the board. If there was an appeal of that, it would go to council. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get further in, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage for looking for areas where we can, and these are smaller things. So this isn't, somebody wants to reduce their buffer to nothing. I mean, this is something that's within 10%, something where, are we really coming to the board to ask for a 1-foot setback? So another change that we are making is to, we are suggesting that the person requesting the variance send out the notices to the property owners. Right now, staff does all of it. We put the sign on the property, we put the advertisement in the paper, and those are pretty traditional for the municipality to take care of. However, in a lot of municipalities, the person applying for the variance, absolutely. The person applying for the variance is the one that sends the notices out. In this case, it's to people within 350 feet or 300 feet of the property. So typically that expense and effort is borne by the applicant, and we've been doing that. So we are suggesting that we change that to be the person that's applying for the variance. So they would send out variance or rezoning, or conditional use. Anything that would require that notice that they would send out. Now they can still get the list from us. We have a little, I can't think of what it's called, but there's a way that we can easily pull up that list and put it into a format that's easy to pass out to people. So we would still provide that so that we can make sure that they were going out to the correct people, but it would be done by the applicant is what we're proposing.
Ms. Terry, what is the proper notification on that certified mail?
It's not certified mail, it's just
letter?
first-class mail, and then they provide a document to us that states that they met that requirement.
Also, they respond back, okay.
Yes, they don't meet the requirement that it has to be postponed.
So right now, when the city is sending these notifications out, we know that they're sent out. So.
Yes.
I understand that what if these notifications aren't sent out, and the applicant is submitting to the city saying we did do this and didn't, would that hinder the
Well,
request
so-
moving forward?
So it doesn't hinder us, it hinders them. It would, and if you look at public notice starts on page 20 and goes to page 21. And the section I'm talking about is at the top of page 21, letter C. It says that,
Oh, here we go, C's on the bottom of that one. Can I go to the-
right, they have to provide an affidavit confirming the notification, was provided. So if they don't do that, or if they say that they did it and they don't, it can make their variance or their zoning map amendment null and void. So there's no benefit to them to not send it out, because also, not only are we putting it in the paper, which I know not everybody reads the legal sections of the paper, but we're posting a sign on the property. So, and I would say a good number of people know that if they see a sign on the property and they live nearby, they're expecting to receive a letter. So, and this is the letter for the public hearing. So we started this after we had a controversial conditional use. We used to just put send the letters out in advance of the public hearing and put that public hearing date on there. Now, even though it's not required by law, it's not required right now by our code, although we're gonna change that. The letter that we send out includes the date and all the information for the planning and zoning board meeting as well. And it also, and we send it out in enough time that they could attend this one as well if they wanted to. So, because again, I'd like to see people here when there's a even with the UDO stuff, but especially a variance or a rezoning, you want the public to come out and ask questions and see how it's gonna affect their property. So we're not trying to hide anything. So there would be no benefit to them to not do it. It would just hurt them. And again, I think if you do an affidavit and you lie in it, then there's probably legal action there as well.
Well, will you still put the sign on the property, or they have to?
We would still put the sign on the property, yes. Just because we buy those in bulk,
Yeah.
it would be difficult for an applicant to do that. That's why that's typically done by a municipality. Same thing with the legal ad in the paper. I mean, we have a standard template that we use for that. So it would just be this notice that they would be doing. Okay, so for the, one of the other processes that we're proposing that we would review would be that staff would review only. That it would be the single family and duplex structures. If they're if they're making a change that affects more than 10% of the current square footage or by 5,000 square feet, whichever is less, they can do that through an administrative site plan application. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on page 13.
Okay.
I'll try to remember to say that as we go forward.
Thank you.
So, right now, any kind of change has to go through the full process. So if you are if you're adding 500 square feet to your commercial development, existing building, let's say it doesn't require any more parking, anything like that, you still have to go through the full site plan process with staff, planning and zoning board, council. So what we're proposing is that these smaller changes, that they would just go through the staff level and not go through that full process. Because keep in mind, the full project at one point had already been through that whole process, so. And if you look at pages 14 and 15, this will change a little bit so that better incorporated into the code, but we're looking to add things like this into the code wherever we can to make it easier. Like, it's a lot of language to review. Like, I've looked at codes for over 25 years now, and when I came here and had to look at ours, trying to find stuff is difficult, and I'm used to looking at code. So for the general public who's not, something like this makes it a lot easier for them to know what the process is. And again, I'm not, the things that aren't really changing, I'm not touching on. We'll still have a 12-month period for how long the permit is good for. Let's see, we talked about the variances. And really what they've done through most of the rest, like a lot of the rest of the language stays the same. They've cleaned it up where they could to make it a little bit easier to understand, but some of this language just has to be technical. Like, there are requirements that you have to go through. For example, I'm looking at one right now where, written approval by a certain, organization shall be mandatory for all plans and proposals for every stormwater drainage facility proposed to service any part of any land development. Some of what's in here comes from state requirements. We did trim down the list, I'm on page 29, the list of permits that are required for construction. Lolly, Sherry, David and I, we all looked at this together, and we had some things in there that we had never used or that could be captured under another permit, especially the building permit. There's a lot that can be captured under that, so we tried to eliminate anything that was unnecessary. Alright, so that takes us through chapter 6, which again, those are the development review and approval process requirements. Does anybody have any other questions or anything specific in this chapter that you wanted to discuss? Yes.
We have the city app. Is there any need to incorporate either there or on the city Facebook page a list of all zoning that's happening in the city? And the reason I'm asking is, like, I'm driving up in Effingham County and I see it there, but I have no idea what it's about, other than going to that page.
Yes, we can definitely do that. I've seen it done a couple of different ways. So I've seen it done through a link on the website where you could go to, and I'm not saying here, I'm just saying other places, where you can click on a link on a website where it takes you to, zoning actions in process, basically. So that does give you that more information about the sign. The other thing we've seen too is where, and I don't know how practical it is. I love the idea because I love QR codes, but like they have QR codes that you can put on the sign, and then you can find out more information that way. Now, maybe just the sign isn't the way to do it. Maybe we find other, like maybe on our agenda, like there's, maybe something like that. Because again, you're driving by a sign, like lots of times you're not gonna be walking by and doing it that way. But, so there are different ways. And I like that because we do, like, I am open to brainstorming for ways that we can get more people here to, to show some interest in what's going on. So yeah, you're right, between Citizen App, Facebook, and other ways we can get the word out there, so.
I think would be helpful, like you said, I think the QR codes are a great idea, because I think it's something that would be really easy to do and
Right.
cost efficient in trying to get it out there as many ways as possible. But maybe put these links to each individual action on social media. So so like maybe we're doing it that way, say, hey, these are some of the items that are coming up, so that people can see them individually.
Well, and like I said, we've got the city app.
Yeah.
We have a city Facebook page.
Do we have any figures on traffic on the app, on how many people are using it?
I am sure that we can get that information. I don't know at the top of my head, but I'm sure that that's part of what we can find out,
It'd be
so.
interesting too to see the analytics of the social media pages as well, and just that way we know where people are getting, where most of the traffic's coming from, so we know where most people are getting their information.
You can either increase that or,
Because there's a lot of information on there. Book a tea time, start a maintenance request. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on there.
Well, it'd be
Mhm.
interesting too to see which posts have more traffic and engagement,
Yeah.
Okay, no, we can definitely, we've got a PIO, so we can, certainly ask her to, pull those reports and let us know, so. I know that people are using the Citizen app, cause we, those come through us, even if they're assigned to other people, so generally, complaints, or needs for like repairs, things like that is a lot of what we see come through right now.
The other thing that I noticed, on page 9, number 3, it talks about, we're appointed, we're not elected on the board, but then it also talks about a secretary for the city. Is that Molly? She's the secretary?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll see if not, I'd love to nominate her.
You're so kind.
I got a question on the administrative variances,
Yes.
like, if the staff.
Are you on a specific page?
Page 6, at
Okay.
the very bottom. If the staff made the decision and say you agreed with it, but whatever the instance is, the next door neighbor had the problem with it, would that neighbor have to file that appeal, or how does that work?
The neighbor could appeal it if they
Okay.
disagreed with it,
Okay,
so, and that appeal, if the staff's issuing the decision, if we're making the decision, then the appeal goes to planning and zoning board.
okay.
If planning and zoning
I
board
didn't-
makes it, then it goes to city council.
Okay, so it's not just, so you turn the applicant down, then he'd file the appeal to us.
Right, it could be
But
either
if-
way.
But if you approved it and the neighbor wasn't, or whatever, somebody else, okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's.
So Terry, I'm still grasping on what Ms. Boyd talked about, the person making the request, them contacting, and I know, like you say, that's how it's done elsewhere. But I recall an instance, and I'm not gonna say who, what, where, but where a citizen, I never knew that this was going on. Well, there was a sign in the yard, yes, but they stated that I never received anything. And we live in a world of junk now.
Mm-hmm.
Is there specific language that we can maybe say if it's an actual zoning change or something that we can have stamped on the letter to say official city of Lincoln, something, so it catches your eye and it doesn't, it's trash. I don't know who, D.H. Horton Builders is and, throw out the trash. Something that identifies that this is an important document.
I don't know, I mean, to me, to some degree, like, you have to be responsible for opening your mail and determining whether it's junk or not. I'm not saying you, I'm saying everybody, I think, has to take like their own responsibility for opening mail. Because we're looking at like either the applicant doing that, or even if we were sending it out, us doing it. I mean, certainly we've heard that from people too, that, I never received it. I mean,
Yes.
and if we get them back, if they come back in the mail as undeliverable, we keep that in the file. That way we can say we tried to deliver it. I
And that
mean,
was the only reason I said certified, or something that says, yep, you signed for it. There's a record showing.
here's the other problem with certified though, is, one, it's expensive. I mean, it's $8 and something for one certified letter that doesn't have more than 4
I thought it
pages
was
in
just
it.
a $1 data signature.
So, no, I don't,
Mm-mm.
no, cause we
When I
send,
send a package, cause when I send something out, I put an adult signature required, and they only charge me $1.
when we send certified letters, I know it's having
Maybe it's
filled,
different
having
on the letter, I guess.
filled it out, like
Yeah.
it's, like it's, cause it's not just the signature, it's the sending it out certified too, so I've just filled out enough of the slips, that's why 8 sticks in my
Yeah, yeah,
head,
yeah.
so. But not only is it that, but there are people that will not go pick up a certified letter, because, especially if it's from the city, cause they assume it's something bad.
It's negative, yeah.
But they took the time to have the letter to where they could come pick it up, and if they don't do it, that's on them.
Mhm.
The person that's making the request did pay, you know, $1 or whatever it is to say, hey, look, we have an important letter, we need you, and if you don't pick it up, that's your own fault.
The other thing I would say though, too, and especially if we can do a QR code or anything on the sign, if you're within 300 feet of the property, likely you're going by the property on a regular-ish basis. So you're going to see the sign in the yard, you know, cause they're, I mean, y'all have seen them, I mean, they're a decent
Oh, yeah.
size, and I can't remember what, we have different colors for different types of signs, but they stand out, so deliberately stand out. You know, and it has information to call the city if you have questions, so I understand where you're coming from. I don't think that there's a perfect solution. So I think we're gonna get pushback if we require an applicant to do certified mailings, because, you know, if you're in a neighborhood, you may just be talking about 4 or 5 houses, but there are some where we've had, you know, it could be 30 properties. I mean, just depending on the size of the property and what surrounds it.
And we could have issues with, you know, that is not required by state law. So
Right.
basically, you know, we don't wanna be more restrictive in any
courtesy.
situation, or we don't wanna require more than what the state requires, and they don't require that, so
Mhm.
I think that could be an issue
I
for
just
some
wanna bring it
people.
to our attention, that's
Yeah.
all.
No,
And they're
that's
always
fine.
gonna come back and say, well, the city didn't do it that way, why are you making me do it?
And y'all can, here's the thing, I'm gonna give you like our advice as staff. And then you can certainly, when you make your motion, you can make a motion that says something different, you know, for any of this, absolutely. Like, you know, the council always wants to know what planning and zoning board, thought about whatever they reviewed, whether it's
So-
UDO things, variances.
You've been
Presumably.
doing this for reading codes for 25 years. You've ran across this before. Somebody comes into a council meeting and says, I never received. How is that handled? Well, we put it in this, we put it in the paper, we did this, we did everything we're required to do.
That's really all that you can say. I mean, I can tell you,
And I'm
like.
fine with that, if that's.
And I'll just say, like, in my previous job, for the longest time, it was certified. The applicant had to send it, but they had to send it certified. And eventually, we did get a lot of complaints about the cost of doing that. And so we changed it to just first-class mail, and then they had to give us, similar to here, an affidavit saying that it was sent at some point. Like that, and that's what we would show the public. Anybody from the public, we would say, look, like, they have signed an affidavit saying that they sent it, and that's, you know, it's not, again, there's nothing that, like, there's no perfect way of doing it, so. Anything else on chapter 6? Okay, so again, you will have, you know, if you think of something, please reach out to me. We have, you know, we will have 3 more opportunities with this, really 4. It will go for public hearing on Monday, and then it will have 2 readings before council at the 2 October meetings. And then at the end of this entire process, after we have gone through all of the chapters, we're going to re-adopt the whole entire UDO. And the reason for that is because, you know, as you can imagine, as we've gone through these chapters, we already adopted chapter 2, the definitions. But as we continue to go through this, we find other definitions that need to be added. For chapter 3, which is the use chapter, we found a couple of uses that we wanted to add in. So that's why we're gonna do a readoption of the entire thing to just cover all of those little add-ons. And that will come back to Planning and Zoning Board. So you'll see, we won't go through the whole thing, but we'll talk about any of the changes to any of the chapters. So that's why I say, like, if you do think of something that you have a question about, call me, email me, text me. If you have something that you know, you can always come to the council meetings as well. Okay, so moving on to chapter 8, subdivision. biggest change for subdivisions is that we are, going to do minor subdivisions and redevelopment and recombinations, we are going to do at the staff level only. And I paused because while the code technically says that all of those should be done by the planning and zoning board and council, because of the, much less level of review that's required, we do those at the staff level right now. So we're just, codifying that. So anything that is, I believe it's 4 or fewer lots would be reviewed at the staff level. If somebody wants to recombine property, so, you know, 1 lot combined with, oh, sorry, I apologize, it's 5 or, oh no, it's 4 or fewer. Recombined property, so you have a property, it was subdivided at one point, you wanna combine it back into one property, that's done at the staff level. And if you want to, vary a property line, then that's done at the staff level as well. So that is the most significant change in subdivisions. Does anybody have any other questions about the subdivision chapter?
Are there any other little changes you want to add?
There aren't any other significant changes. A lot of this technical language just, has to be in there. So if you do not have anything else with chapter 8 subdivisions, then if y'all want to do a motion, and then we'll move on to the next 2.
Okay, if I can get a motion to either approve, reject, or,
I'll make a motion we accept it as
okay,
presented.
I second that.
motion made by Mr. Bowman, seconded by Mr. Doss. Now, before we continue with this, any additional language that we wanna add, delete?
I think it's fairly well.
Yes. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Now, keep in mind for record that Mr. Griffin did step out of the room.
He actually had to leave, he had an emergency
Okay.
come up.
So we have, Mr. Doss with a yes, Ms. Boyett with a yes, Mr. Bowman with a yes, and myself, Miller, with a yes. And that part is approved.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. I am going to talk about floods first because it is much easier, so chapter 10. And it's easier only because we only made changes as necessary, so things like where the code used to say growth management ordinance, it now says unified development ordinance. We made changes in 2023, I believe, related, that were required by the state to be made. All of the communities had to make them. So that was so our flood ordinance was reviewed fairly recently. So we made those changes that the state required, and so the only thing that our consultant did with this chapter, now they still reviewed it and I reviewed it as well, but the only changes that they made were really just things like, changing growth management ordinance to unified development ordinance and things of that nature. There were no substantive changes made in this flood chapter. So I'm happy to answer any non-technical questions. So I'm not a floodplain manager, but I will do my best if y'all have questions about the flood.
Ms. Doss? Mr. Bowman?
What page are we on?
So this is page 60 in your packets. chapter 9. We have a lot of changes in chapter 9. So this one I actually am gonna go through almost page by page. So this originally was called, it was called environment. And so we talked to our consultant about trying to find a name that was more reflective of what's actually in it. So that's how we came up with maintenance and enforcement. We start with noise, and really a lot of what was in here, we had some, you know, we had regulations related to noise, some regulations related to animals, and then kind of a general nuisance section. And what we did was we looked at all of the complaints and violations and types of things that we had been dealing with for the past couple of years, and then asked our consultant to incorporate them into this chapter so that we wouldn't just have this blanket nuisance. Because it's very, like you were saying at the very beginning, it is hard to determine what's a nuisance if it's just a catch-all. You still need it. You still need nuisance, because sometimes that's all it can fall under. But anything that we can put in here to make it more specific, it's much easier for our code enforcement officer when they're out there to say, you're in violation of section, 123.c, this specific thing. It says you can't have a rooster, then it's a nuisance. So, so we are gonna talk about that. So all that being said, for noise, we didn't make a lot of changes to the noise section. It was already pretty thorough. So for that one, we really didn't make a lot of changes.
Just out of curiosity, do we have an idea what like the top 3 nuisance are? Is it like radios? Is it any idea?
Like for noise or just in general? Like code enforcement complaints that we get, or?
Well, not like a container on someone's property, nothing like that. But, noise, mufflers, screeching tires, what are like the big?
We don't get a lot of noise complaints, actually. I would say animals, grass,
Grass being like too high?
grass being too tall,
Okay.
Another kind
I'm
of-
trying to think of what, and maybe, derelict vehicles or people parking on the street. So you will see specific information in here about that. Those are kind of, I would say, like our top
Yes.
calls that we get, and it doesn't mean that we still get the occasional, one that's just specific to one person. Like we're gonna have that, but, So for noise, like I said, we generally kept that the same. The next section is soil erosion, sedimentation, and pollution control. So this is something that is actually, if a property's developing and they're over 1 acre, this is reviewed by the state. So they have to get a specific permit related to this. And they have to have that permit before we take it forward, generally before we take it forward to the Planning and Zoning Board for review. So, if it's under an acre, they don't have to, but if it's over an acre, they do. So where we really start with the meat of the changes is, for me, it's page 49, it's section 90-310, animals. So some of this language was already in, some has been added. So one of the things that we've added is the keeping of roosters is prohibited within the city limits. Because that has typically been a big complaint. If somebody has a rooster, we generally know about it because it is a nuisance. But it is very difficult to just say it's a nuisance. If I have something here that says you can't have a rooster, then I can make somebody get rid of their rooster.
If you had to estimate how many people own roosters within the city limits, what do you think that number is?
Oh, I don't know.
5, 10?
How many complaints you had?
I know, right?
We'll have to talk about this.
I mean, I can think of at least like 5.
Not including mine.
So, I'm sorry?
Not including mine.
So, and not everybody complains about a rooster. You know, like, I know where there are a couple living, and we don't get complaints about those, but we, like, and it, sometimes it depends on, you know, how much property there is, yeah, who the neighbors are, if the rooster crows at, you know, obnoxious times. You know, there are a lot of factors, but it's, when we do get a complaint, the only way we can deal with it effectively, to me, is to say you just can't have roosters. So if you have a quiet rooster, I'm never gonna know about it. I'm not saying that you can have roosters. If it says you can't have roosters, you can't have roosters. I'm just saying, like, you don't know about it if it's a quiet rooster. So, or somebody doesn't let us know. We're not, our code enforcement officer is not driving around looking for roosters. They're not driving around listening for roosters, anything like that. Like, that was a thing that we dealt with on a complaint-driven basis, so.
Is there still a cat issue over in?
Yes, that's what I'm reading here, and it's somewhat vague. There's a scenario in Lost Plantation right now where somebody's feeding, there's 2 families that are feeding feral cats
Okay,
on either LP property or the city of Rankin's property. And, it's been done for over 10 years, and I tried looking for something that states, you know, you can or can't do this. They're feral cats. They're there repetitively. They keep the animals sprayed, neutered, maintained, but it's causing other issues, and it's not these people's property that they're feeding the animals on.
now what types of issues is it causing?
So at the pool area, the food, the things that are left, it's attracting raccoons. The raccoons are going in the pool and doing their business in the pool.
Okay,
They're doing some damage to, seeding, some trees, things like that. It's been stated, but I have no proof of it, that there's two of them that have some kind of skin disorder. And then when they're done feeding them, the cats just throughout the area. So I'm trying to come up with some kind of resolution from the Willow Peg side
right.
to say, okay, well, this is in the best interest of everybody.
I'll see what the regulations say here. I know, like where I live in Beaufort County, there's specific regulations not like that are, I think they're either through the county or through the state that trump any local regulations about feral cats that allows them, but I don't know what it
Because this here,
says
it just
here,
says,
so.
no person shall raise or keep or permit to be raised or kept on premise that he owns or controls inside the city any dog or cat unless, and then they talk about cages and pens and.
We did have an incident in 2022, 2021 that I'll see if I can find information
Okay.
on to give to you.
Okay.
About that same thing he's talking about.
Okay, so we'll look into that,
Was
so
this
we'll
on
see if we,
17? Was that on 17?
No, at the golf course.
Yeah, on hole 17?
Oh,
Well,
actually,
it's-
no, it was behind the bar,
It's in front of the maintenance department.
there you go.
In front of the entrance, right next to the pool.
Okay, 'cause 17 has another.
It's on city, it was on city property that
the
people were
lady
going
that-
on and beating the
and
cat.
feeding, okay.
Yeah.
Took
I'll
care of
tell
the
you
cat
Okay.
lady, they called her. I don't think she lives there anymore.
Okay, I didn't know that was.
Cause you could see at night, it was like Pied Piper when the
Yeah,
cats
yeah,
would go back
that's,
to her
yeah.
house. So anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked.
No,
But
that's
it's-
like, that's what this is for. If
the
there's
language
something
is
that we
very
need to
vague
add,
on this,
Yeah.
and we do have a situation
Yep,
within
I'm
the
sorry
city
about that.
that we need to address.
Okay.
I think.
yeah, if there's something that we need to address and we can, then let's talk about it tonight, absolutely. I'm not saying that we're not gonna come back next year and make some changes here and there to the code. I mean, codes are living documents and you're expected to do that as changes occur, but as much as we can capture beforehand is better, so.
The other big thing that I see is the animal waste, and I see that is addressed on page 49, section H. Just clean it up is what it says. I
Mhm.
mean, in that self, and I don't know if that's something that maybe signs need to be put up, and I'll talk to the associations about maybe putting some signs up in the communities. If your animal makes waste, clean it up.
Right, and that should be common sense, but I think it's a problem in every,
Should be.
like every
Yeah.
neighborhood. I mean, and not just here, I mean, I just think that's always a neighborhood issue, is people having to send,
Where's the
Stuff out.
language about the rooster?
I'm sorry?
Where's the language about the rooster?
It
Just saw
is,
it.
I just saw, yeah.
Page
Under-
46,
Yeah, the
section
the
A.
very beginning of,
Number
Item
two.
2, keeping of roosters is prohibited within the city limits.
All right.
So you can keep chickens or hens, just not roosters.
right, and we're gonna talk about that, next. So, as you move in that same section, but move to F, keeping horses, livestock, and other animals, it lists a variety of animals, and then it also, as you turn the page, it gives you a chart of what that distance of separation has to be for the various animals. So, if you have, and I'm just gonna use chickens as an example, cause we get calls a lot about chickens. So, if you have fewer than 5, then this distance separation doesn't come into play. You have to have 5 or more for them to have that 200-foot separation, so, for chickens.
So there's
Um,
nothing that states based on the size of your property, like if I have a .48, half an acre, I can still keep chickens and if my HOA allows it.
As long as you have, below 4, now if you have 5 or more and you don't have 200 feet, from where the chickens are to, I
the
believe,
neighbor.
right, then you can't have them. So we had somebody that was keeping a goat, and it didn't matter where the goat was in her yard, because it wasn't gonna meet the 200 feet to her neighbors, no matter where it was. So, so it just depends on the different type of animal, but it's not necessarily based on the size of your property. And then there are some general regulations related to animals, and then, unless you have any specific,
So, on 5, does that mean you're not allowed to have an outdoor cat?
wait, where?
Under your chart, section 5, all animals are foul except for dogs in areas where confined. And cats shall be kept in adequate enclosures or tethered. Cause that may be something for your cat thing.
Okay,
But that states if you have 5 or more. So
No.
as a property owner, I can have 4 cats and not worry about the distance.
There's no cat, there's no number for cats. That's what
right,
it is.
right.
That's
Or
what
a
it is.
chicken.
What you're saying is
I
you're,
was talking about cats.
like if you got an outside cat, they're not
Yeah.
gonna be tethered or, okay.
Enclosed. So what's that mean for 5 there? Is that no outdoor cats or?
Or we strike that section. There was something I had them strike related to, the keeping of cats and dogs before that, cause they had something about that they had to be, I can't remember what it was, but, I had her take that out, cause I was like, then nobody could have a cat or a dog on their property. So, so if we need to strike that for cats, cause I agree, there's no way to say that about outdoor cats.
Yeah,
And people have outdoor cats, so, so do you wanna look at striking the in cats part?
I'm sorry, what?
If you look at the
this
chart,
Yeah,
look at V, 5.
yeah. All animals
It says a cat shall be kept in adequate enclosures or.
Oh, actually, I think that we are reading it wrong. I think it's all animals are foul. If you didn't pay attention to that, I think it should be like all animals are foul except dogs and cats shall be. So we probably just need to tweak that, cause I think that's the intention, is that it's not supposed to capture cats and dogs.
Yeah, okay, got you, so
So,
cats
but
and.
but because it took us a little bit to get there, so we will
So
tweak
put the
that
cats
language,
right
yeah.
after dogs and that'll be
Yes.
okay, okay. Cause that's the way it looks.
Yes,
The way that is punctuated, it's like.
yes, until I read it like the 4th time, I was,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we'll fix that.
What about animals that are considered dangerous? And I know it's sort of touch like pit bulls.
There's-
Right, we have a section on
Page 47.
vicious animals and guard dogs. ready to move from animals onto lights? So we have added language in here that requires lights to be, except for street lighting, to be, shielded and installed and maintained to limit illumination only to the target and to minimize light trespass. We had an incident that went on for several months where somebody had installed very bright, I'm gonna say floodlights on the front and sides of their home, so bright that they like disturbed neighbors even with blackout curtains. So bright that driving into, like a neighbor driving into their yard could barely see because of the glare. And we couldn't, and the lights were on all the time. Even this property owner left for, I think, 3 months and the lights were on the entire time. So the only way that we could treat it as a violation was through the nuisance section, and not even through our nuisance section. We had to go through the state code to find, with our attorneys, to find a section in the state code. So we wanna make sure that something like that doesn't happen again. I'm not a big proponent of writing a section of code to deal with one issue, but I could see something like this happening again, and we wanna have something specific to address it. So yes, have lights on your property, but they don't need to disturb your neighbors. They need to light up what you need to light up in your yard, in your driveway, on your porch, but they do not need to be shining to everybody, so. So that's why that's in there. Seeing this next one made me realize what our other big complaint is, and it is potholes. And where we have seen a lot of potholes are on access easements or access ways, but they're not owned by the city. If they're on our property, if they're on areas owned by the city, we'll take care of it. When we get a complaint, we'll go fill them. But we have had some access ways, and I'll give you some examples. So where at the northern end of the city where Dogs and More is, there's that access that goes through there. There were a couple of significant potholes there. That property is not owned by the city. Where, I'm not gonna be able to think of it, what's Rutland Tire? Rutland Tire. If you've ever tried to go in through there from Fort Howard Square, there was a very large pothole. And then the other one was where,
I think they fixed that one.
I'm sorry?
By the car wash, the new car wash.
Mm-hmm.
I think they fixed that.
Yes, yeah, they have. They all these ones I'm naming to you, they have fixed, but it took a lot to get there because we don't have any concrete language. But just, and then from, the new car wash down to Truist Bank, there were several potholes along there. So again, those are all areas that are fairly well traveled, but the city doesn't own it. So we can't go on private property and fix those, and without language in the code, it was really hard. Like we got there a roundabout way, but it was very hard because it had to be a roundabout way, versus again, having something specific that says you're in violation of section 90-312. There's no arguing with that. So, all right, so vegetation, this first part is already in there, so in case you don't know, grass can't be any higher than 12 inches. So if it is, and it's very obvious, our code enforcement officer is not going out there with a ruler. But if we get a complaint, then they do go out with a ruler, and if it's significantly over that, then we make contact with the property owner. Generally pretty receptive to trimming it. We don't have that as an issue a lot of the time. So we also have this this tree section. So with any dead or diseased tree or part of a tree is a nuisance when the tree or any part of it could fall or blow onto a public way, public property, off of the property, and imperil life or property or impede traffic. Right now, the way our code is it can only be if it's a dead tree. If it's a dead tree, we can require somebody to take it down. And I should say if it's a dead tree and it could fall on something, not just in the middle of a vacant property. But this way, this allows us, even if it's not dead, if there is a tree that is leaning and could fall into a road, on a sidewalk, something like that. So basically it has a target, then we can require that it be removed. So that's the purpose of that section. The drainage ditches, that section was already in the code. We're not really making any changes to that. Our next section is vehicles. So we had talked about that this was another area of the code, or another area where we get complaints. So what we're suggesting is that for a derelict vehicle, which is in an inoperative or junk condition, there will also be a definition added to the code for this, that if it is, let's say like on your driveway, then it has to have a tarp over it. So, or it can be in your garage, anything like that, but if it's out in the driveway, it needs to be covered with a tarp. And it can't be parked in the street. We have several vehicles right now, both ways, both just in a driveway that haven't been, like, I can tell you from having driven around with our previous code enforcement officer, it looks the same as when I drove around with him in February as it did when, you know, like if I would drive around today. Because we didn't really have good language to tackle that. And then there are also areas where there are derelict vehicles in the street, so if a ambulance or a fire truck needed to get by, like those cars can't be moved.
What good does it do to have a tarp over it? But I'm just saying.
Because you
Not
don't,
an eyesore.
it's not an eyesore, exactly.
Tarp looks pretty eyesore to me, but.
So, and unfortunately, like, I have seen some good tarps, but when we went to take pictures to give to our consultant, I could not find any of those vehicles under tarp. So again, this is like y'all, if you would like to recommend something differently, please, like recommend, like you're welcome to. So I understand where you're coming from, but if I live on a property that doesn't have a driveway, doesn't have a garage, then what are my options? So
How long can it be there? You don't have any.
well, and here's the other thing that I will tell you is putting time limitations is very hard because I don't know when it started. Like they don't have to get a permit. So like, is it the first time I notice it? Is it,
I got you.
so
Okay.
that's where we get there. Okay, parking of vehicles. So it shall be unlawful to park any vehicle, including trailers and boats, on any unpaved surface such as grass, pine straw, or mulch at any spot on the property unless approved through a special event permit.
I need to go back to the number 1 paragraph.
Okay.
there. In the first sentence, it says we can have a derelict vehicle with a tarp over it. In the last sentence, it says we can't have derelict vehicles parked on the street. So, does that mean that if it's parked on the street and it has a tarp over it?
You can't have it on the
Okay,
street
yeah.
at all.
Okay, very good.
Now, the parking of the vehicle is number 1. I thought beside your house, behind your house was all. exempt
Yes,
from all
it
that.
can, and I've struggled with this one a little bit too, because I know that there are some properties where the only parking on the property period is unpaved. Like there is no paved
Yeah,
parking.
exactly. You're still, I mean, I've still, a lot of houses I see without even a paved driveway, so.
So it may be that we want to rework that a little bit.
Maybe in front of the house is, or beyond a certain setback of the house, or,
We just have it match the same language that we did before.
cause, yeah,
Sorry,
cause I thought this was all covered on that. I mean, is this a separate, complete?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and get that reworked, so, so we do have, so the part I think that you're talking about in chapter 3, is like RVs, boats and things like that have to be beyond the front plane of the house, is that what you're talking about?
Mhm.
Yeah, so these, and maybe it's that we're getting, like, I definitely don't wanna have conflicts between one section of the code and another, but then this is also meant to be, for cars. So if you
Well, it
take
says
the
not-
boats and trailers out of it, I do think that we need to probably look at that a little bit more because, like I said, I know that there are spots where their only option to park is on, grass or dirt.
And something about, like, he touched on something when he said, talking about the tarp on the vehicle. So if I go acquire some junk and put it in my front yard and just put a tarp over it, it's good to go.
Is it in your driveway or your front yard?
Front yard, it doesn't say that on there, that's why I'm asking, on derelict vehicles. Cause I mean, then you can just put the tarp, I mean, like you said, tarp's not necessarily a.
So would your preference be to be more specific that it can only be a vehicle covered with a tarp, or would your,
The fact
Is the
that it has to be
preference to,
parked
like,
on,
get rid
probably
of the
parked on
tarp?
a parked on a driveway, not just in a yard, or just like, not in the front, at least not in the front yard, in a fenced-in backyard behind your house, it's out of sight, out of mind, but.
but if it's in the front, it has to be on a driveway?
Yeah, or,
Okay.
yes, or
Okay.
like a designated parking area, like, you can't just,
Okay,
cause
yep,
there's some cars in front yards.
okay. Nope, we can make that change. Alright, and then moving to vehicle repair. No person shall perform a major automotive repair of more than one vehicle at any one time unless you own the house where you're doing it. You're also, as the owner, you're doing the work, and the work is done inside a garage or enclosed structure. And there is gonna be a definition for major automotive repair. So. You know, if you're in your driveway changing the oil, that's not a major automotive repair, cause you're gonna get that done in 30 minutes, an hour, and be done with it, so. And then we're also prohibiting painting of vehicles unless you're inside an approved spray booth. The trash, we didn't make any significant changes there. That already existed. The other nuisances, we really didn't make any changes there except to, like I said, kind of pull anything out of there that wasn't specific enough and make it into its own section. We still, despite trying to capture everything, we still need to have a general nuisances section, cause there will be something that we didn't capture.
Now, on the trash part on section D, 1B, commercial trash, like, or places gonna be grandfathered into not having a.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so I'm saying there's a lot of that, I'm like, I
Yeah,
see
we
that
can't-
being an undue.
Right, we can't require things
Yeah.
after the fact. If they did a major remodel of the site, then they might be required to come into compliance then, but yes, there are people that aren't gonna be in
Like I said,
compliance.
there's a lot, and I'm like, that seems
Oh,
like
yeah.
a lot of hardship on some people.
Absolutely.
Okay,
No, we're not
those
gonna-
hardships.
We're not gonna do that. Does anybody else have any other, questions about any other parts of this chapter? So what I noted that we need to look into change are feral cats, clarifying that section 5 under the chart about that dogs and cats aren't required to be kept in adequate enclosures or tethered. We're going to clean up the derelict vehicle section so that it can be, derelict vehicles can only be on, if they're in the front, can only be on the driveway or designated parking area. And then rework B, the parking of vehicles, just rework that section. I think I understand what y'all
I
are
don't know how other municipalities handle, derelict vehicles being on jack stands for 9 months to a year. And that's what I was trying to look at, to see if there was something that may have popped up.
I can ask our consultants what they came across when they were doing the
It's like-
research, so.
And I mean, cause I was also thinking, like, if somebody really wanted to be trying, I mean, cause you just said grass and mulch, I mean, what's stopping you from just going and getting a little bit of gravel? Well, that's my parking spot in the middle of the front yard still,
Mhm.
but just pouring, just a couple bags of gravel and being, ha, look, I outsmarted you.
They got that much money, they would fix their vehicle.
Pardon me?
If they got that much money, they should just fix it.
I have one on my bus route that's been on jack stands for going on over a year now, in the front yard.
I think I've read somewhere where you could have a vehicle on jack stands or blocks. And we could put that in there.
Mhm, exactly, I mean, that's like, you can, if you want direction like that, it, you know, cause you're right, if it's covered with a tarp, but it's up, and you can still see the blocks or the jack stands underneath, then maybe we're not accomplishing.
I just think a tarp is just hiding a, like you said.
Yeah, that
what's
tarp's on
sitting in
eyesore,
front.
yeah.
Alright, so do you wanna just strike the tarp and just require it to be in an enclosed building?
I prefer that. That's my suggestion.
No, I mean,
What about people who don't have garages or frontage?
No, I don't think that, I don't think we
Well, in that
should do
case, then backyard.
get rid of the storage area, if the car means that much to you.
And where I'm coming from is like I said, there's a place over off of Fort Howard where this truck is, I mean, it's been wrecked and it's been on jack stands for over a year now. The driveway is not much longer from, it's maybe 15 feet, and it's been sitting the same place for that long. That, I think, some kind of time limit, whether it be a decal, like they do on the highway, okay, here's your notice. You have X amount of time.
As
30,
soon as
60
somebody makes
days.
a complaint, as soon as that complaint is
Right,
made.
right.
Or,
And then that starts the clock,
yeah,
official notification.
I mean, you see them on the highways where, I don't know what it is, but it's an orange sticker.
at least 3 days.
You have this amount of time or it's gonna get towed. It's, I mean, and I'm thinking about the neighbors. I mean, I'd hate to have to walk out my front door and see something that's on, you know, there's people that do like to work on their vehicles, but not when it's been a year. And the things.
I back out of my driveway every day with that happening. He's got a tarp over it, so he's legal.
So technically it's legal.
Mm.
I just, I'm not big on tarps over,
Yeah.
basically covered in turd.
yeah, that's why.
Alright, well, y'all can make changes, make suggestions when you vote, absolutely, for what you wanna see.
What do you think is an acceptable amount of time? 90 days?
I think 90 days is plenty of time. I mean, that's being fair to say, okay, I called, made a complaint on your property, code enforcement comes out, they, however they do it, sticker, decal, notification, you're on the clock now for 30, 60, 90 days. I think 90 days is
I
more than
think,
sufficient.
wait, I mean, even say 60, I mean.
And 60 days, that's 2 months, you know, the only thing there is maybe it's special order parts, maybe it's this and that, but you shouldn't have to have a vehicle up on jack stands for 3 months. I just,
Particularly with situations where it's at least a year.
yeah, and it looks like nothing's been done.
Here, and I'll put this out there too, so, keep in mind too, that, let's say they get to day 60, they haven't removed it, so then we write a citation, it's 2 months before it goes to court. That, they write 2 months ahead, so then you're at 4 months. And then typically what the court does with our violations is they give an extension of usually about a month for them to fix the problem, so then you're at 5 months. So just think about that as you're thinking about a time limit, that it's not really only 60 days and then it'll be gone.
Yeah.
And some people may comply right away so that they don't get a ticket, but that's just the reality of if it goes to court. Like, if a citation's required, that's the minimum time.
Be in the middle, 60 days,
Yeah, 60 days.
45.
That's 2 months.
I might, it was like, cause I mean, obviously, I'd rather be shorter, but I mean, obvious circumstances, the day we live in now, like you just said about parts being unobtainium on some things.
I mean, a lot of stuff you can order online from, different websites.
Right,
You didn't
right.
have access to 15, 20 years ago, so you should get them, but,
Could be a hardship for people too,
and, maybe that's another scenario, if you know it's gonna be a hardship, maybe there's a special, I don't wanna say permit, but extension, when they do receive it, maybe they say,
Well,
look,
and I would say, like, we always, like, if somebody's working with us, we're not unreasonable. So, like, you can show us that you've ordered something and it's not here yet or something like that. Like, we're not unreasonable, but I think you have to start somewhere. Like, if you're gonna do a time limit, then you have to start with a number.
I think this is more
Then I'd say like that, if we're gonna make exceptions, I'd say go down to 30 days.
And I think this is more a situation where it's a junk car situation, not necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think,
someone's
yeah.
Repairing, trying to repair their
because
vehicle.
most people are doing their brakes or doing this and that, even.
They need the car done, they need
It's
to
gonna be
get
done
somewhere.
in a couple of weeks, you would hope. So, alright. 90 days, 60 days, 45 or 30?
30.
30?
45.
45? Mr. Bowen, your thoughts?
60.
Ollie?
30.
30.
Thank you.
I think 30 days is enough time to, and with that, when the code enforcement person comes out, they can state their case as to, and they.
And then you still have 2 months till it goes to court, and if it's
Well,
cleaned up by that point, it's.
But if it's, hey, this part's coming from Timbuktu, wherever, it's gonna be 30 days before he gets here, well, maybe that's an exception that the city can take a look at on a case by case. But we gotta set a precedent to say, look, we can't have this.
That's why I'm saying go to the
30
shorter,
days.
the 30 day, the shorter route, because, like she said, everything's gonna be extended because of this, and this.
Alright, can you go with 30?
I agree with 30, because I think that more addresses the cars that are in a junk situation, or like that are not going to be salvaged, I guess. But for people that we could, like you said, if it's someone where it's a situation where they're trying to repair the vehicle, maybe it's a hardship situation where
Right.
they're waiting, then if they're working with the city,
Right.
that's their discretion.
I learned a new term with that the other day. It's a wet part. A wet part means it's out there in the ocean somewhere, on its way here.
Are you suffice for 30 days?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
what
think
about
30
tarp or
days.
no tarp? Where'd we end up with that?
I'd say get rid of the tarp.
Get rid of the tarp? Okay, so it's gotta be in an enclosed
See,
building.
it wasn't me, it's one of you guys. I read it on your head.
So then it's just like, if somebody has it outside, it's a violation no matter what.
Well, but here's the
Unless
thing.
it's hidden out of sight, out of mind.
Yes, absolutely, if it's
somebody-
something where somebody complains about it.
If somebody doesn't complain about it, then
It's
it-
no problem.
it's, hey, this guy's got a thing up on and it's an eyesore, code enforcement, there's your 30-day start.
Right, or as the code enforcement officer is driving by, if
Right,
they
right,
observe
they see
it, then,
That's your problem.
then they'll
For
document it,
those out
so.
there on TV land, there's a bug flying.
I know, right?
We're not all crazy.
Okay, okay. Any other things that you would want to see changed with this chapter?
So if you look at C on page 53, it sort of talks about this, vehicle repair. No person shall perform a major automotive repair that includes, and then it lists one vehicle at any time, one time unless the person performing the overhaul is the occupant of the premises, the person performing the overhaul is the owner of the vehicle, and the work is done inside a garage or enclosed structure. So there should be no reason that a vehicle is on jack stands outside for more than 30 days.
Mhm.
Because if it's that major,
And that's current code, correct? I mean, there was no changes to that, isn't that our current?
The derelict vehicle section and the vehicle repair section are both new.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I thought.
Cause these are complaints that we've gotten and we really haven't had a lot to be able to deal with
I
it, so.
think we add the date time in, but C sort of covers it. If you're doing a major repair, it's gotta be inside, it can't be outside. Cause it states it right there.
That's kinda trying to keep somebody from doing mechanic work at their house
Well, and look,
for hire.
it's
Yes,
expensive to.
exactly, for hire is.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything that we should do, cause like, I noticed mobile mechanics is now a huge thing.
That's I
Is
believe
that-
something like that is different, there are a lot of mobile, same thing, like a mobile vet, I saw that, a sign for that the other day. So somebody like that that's coming, dealing with it and leaving, that's not an issue, because they're coming, they're taking care of it, and then they're going. It's the going on for days and days and days at a time, or, like Mr. Bowen said, we've also had complaints about somebody running a vehicle repair and painting business out of their home, which is not allowed as a home occupation, so.
Without a business license, without insurance.
Oh, even with a business license, you can't do it
Right,
as a home
right.
occupation, so it's just, but it's, that's why we have to tighten up some of this language, because we haven't been successful at using our existing language to try to make those things stop.
I'm probably way ahead on this one, but page 52 and 67. It's like the same paragraph over and over. I mean, is there a reason to be that redundant?
Can you, cause I think my page numbers are a little different than yours, can
They
you?
are.
Section
They are.
90.314, drainage ditches,
Second to last page.
and then the next to last page, the 9343, and then the next line, the will as well.
Okay, so under 314,
A and B are the same as A and B on that last page. Or,
so A and B for trash and A and B for drainage ditches?
yeah, I mean,
Okay, we can take a look at that.
see how they're both, I mean, they're exact, I mean, now if they need to be in two places and
And
state
see-
that twice over, that's fine, but I mean, it's the exact same.
That's what I was looking for, to see if there was a reason it was, cause. the
Okay.
Well, just like, maybe if the first one didn't contain, cause the
Right.
first one doesn't. So I just think that's just a double.
Okay, we can definitely look at that,
Sure,
yeah, if
the
I
other
can cut
thing-
stuff out, we'll cut stuff out, so.
The other question that I have, and it's not, but I just wanna ask the question on page 34, code 90-308. They talk about the noise of lawn care. It says commercial property, as far as the times.
300 seems a little close, don't you, is that what you were going for?
Well, the reason I'm asking is the 300 plus the time for commercial property if it's adjacent to a residential property. Does that make sense to then go back to the residential times of 7 to 8 PM? Whereas commercial is, 7 to 10 PM. So if you look at B on page 34. it
Yep,
talks
I see where
about-
you're talking about, so what is the change that you're talking about though?
Well, I feel that if a commercial property is adjacent to or within a distance of a residential property, I think it should revert back to the
Okay.
residential stature. I mean, do you guys agree, disagree?
They have it here 1,000 feet or greater in any direction. Would that satisfy?
But not for the tools and power, tools
Okay,
and
for free.
landscaping. So unless it's adjacent to a residential property, and if it's adjacent to a residential property, then it's 7 to 8, right?
7 to 8.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, I was just,
it does.
I don't know how long, or 300 feet is that?
300 feet is about, about two widths, two homes in Lost Plantation, if that gives you an idea.
Which section?
I'm not sure.
I mean, for something, I mean, just, for something like this where, you know, you're talking about coming out to do it's a lot easier for somebody to know if they just know if they're adjacent to a residential property versus a certain distance.
Yeah,
Right.
For something like that, just to say it's,
I like that.
that's what it is, so, cause it's not gonna be a lot of properties, so. Alright, anything else?
That's all I have.
Alright. And I captured all of the suggested changes, so when you make your motion, if you wanna recommend it as approval with the changes that we discussed in the meeting, that's fine. You don't have to go through it section by section.
I make a motion we approve this with all the notes that Terry's taking and the amendments we asked for.
Okay.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Doss, a second by Ms. Boyette. Any concerns, comments, or further suggestions? Public? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? It passes unanimously, 4-0.
Alright, thank y'all. So again, so these two, so 9 and 10, public hearing on, September 23rd. Chapter 6 and 8, which were the two that we reviewed first, public hearing on October 14th. And then again, they each have their own separate first and second reading. What will come to y'all next in October will be the overlay districts. So you'll see both the map that shows the overlay districts that are being proposed, as well as the language that goes along with those. And I think that's all from the UDO, I believe, that's coming to you in October. And then we have a variance and a rezoning that'll be at that meeting as well.